today what I would like to mention and continue in your great presentation, and for me it was really fascinating, Ingeborg, to see the amount of investment that goes in all these activities, and it's a really interesting perspective to add to that. So the point we are trying to discuss in our meetings in the Lawrence Center is how to define this interaction between emerging new forms of public engagement in science, this grassroots engagement with science, and how to position it in relation to these, let's say, more established art-science collaboration, or maybe look into even some examples from the past. So I'll try to somehow describe my position in it and my role, because something very paradoxical happened to me this year. I became a collector, and my God, that's the most, I would say, sad thing that can happen to someone who believes it's involved with trends and new things. I'm regressing somehow to the most traditional art historian type of position. Sorry, I hope you will not hold it against me, as becoming someone who collects prototypes, DIY bioprototypes, and I'll try to explain why it happened and whether it's okay. This is, in short, what I am. I'm some strange combination of designer and a philosopher. I have a day job, which is yeah, it happens, but I'm also an avid member of few hacker spaces because I'm originally from Prague, so it's Bermalab in Prague, then Hacteria, Open Biology Network, which is not really a space, we're a network operating from Asia to Europe to everywhere, and then I'm a supporter of something called Hackademia, which is this really sweet model of involving really young children into hacking, making, tinkering, also all around the world. And I guess my obsession right now are these tools, which some of you may be familiar. Whoever touched a 3D printer or came close to it, look, it's almost half. Arduino, anyone tinkering with Arduinos here? Perfect, it's another third. And anyone who ever tried to to create his own design circuit board? Yes, oh my God, that's like impressive. So these are the tools, and I'm trying to see how these tools nowadays can serve these type of goals, which is open science, citizen science goals. So I consider myself an open science advocate, and in some of the projects I'll try to explain how I do it. I'm especially active now in trying to see how we can use these open hardware tools to build infrastructure for doing science in developing countries. And in some of the projects I'm involved in, we're actually trying to create a lab in unexpected places, rather than to move artists into labs or, to recreate labs in weird places. That's connected to this interest, which I'm just starting, and maybe this is more a provocation if some people want to join. I really believe we need to change this criteria, how universities are ranked and described, and introduce something more related to community science, open science, to more socially responsible science. And I see in this respect why it's important to be a designer and a philosopher, because when you prototype and you create tools, you can often use them also as tools to understand some policy issues, or to understand how certain social groups can interact with these technologies much more directly than just creating some panels or discussing it. And this is more, the last point is more a personal or more the design aspect of my research. I'm really passionate, and I work on projects that try to connect traditional crafts with these open hardware tools. So we do these Kyoto traditional wind chimes connected to Geiger tubes and trying to hack that. So, and this is what I'll talk about. I'm becoming a collector. So yes, I'm interested, can we really collect DIY bioprototypes? Why should we do it? To make one thing very clear, I never work alone. As you can see, the list of collaborators is rather large. So even if I use most of these projects is we. And I'm fortunate, I consider myself fortunate to have these amazing people around me that push me and provoke me, and it's always some collaboration. Okay, so it's a lot of theory. Let me show a concrete example how such projects that I'm involved in looks like. And this This is an example from Indonesia, which I also will use quite extensively in my presentation because it relates to your organization, to VAH, that created this amazing Fab Lab in Yogyakarta. And I'm just like really inspired by what is happening thanks to that cooperation. So back in 2012, I spent like a whole month in Yogyakarta interacting with House of Natural Fiber, where the Fab Lab is somehow based or it's in cooperation with them. So interacting with some Indonesian citizen science organizations, universities, we really visited a lot of them. And we decided to create a project which will somehow bring science on the streets of Yogyakarta. And Yogyakarta is famous for these food trucks. I don't have a picture actually. And we decided to use these food trucks culture, if you have been to Indonesia, you probably noticed them, as basically such laboratories. So we use them as places for molecular gastronomy, as a type of simple science that people can taste and experience something. So we took this angkringan, or varungs they're called, and we completely changed things which are usually in the varung. We just introduced a lot of scientific equipment which was hacked by going to the local market, repurposing, reusing scanners into like tools to kill bacteria, basically, hacking webcams into microscopes, putting like a sound system, putting a GPS device to track the location of the angkringan. And then we took this food truck to the streets, and we were performing some pretty simple spherification techniques with the local wine, recreating a local dessert, basically. So why did we do this? Like, as you can see, some of the things were not very successful. It wasn't very tasteful. But it was a lot of fun doing this. The whole process of hacking the angkringan, using the tools, working with various people, it was very process-oriented, open project. So in this, I did work as a designer, but my interest in this project was more like testing certain ideas. So one of the ideas was, can we really create research capability in this developing countries context? Can we really go to the local market, repurpose the stuff, and create like some lab equipment? So it was this research into how we create this DIY bio, how DIY bio can serve the global south, let's put it this way. And then it was also an experiment which continued into connecting these DIY biospaces, which I look into since 2010 when I fell in love with the DIY bio. While visiting Boston. And so it was about how can we connect this organization and let them interact. Maybe I'll show another example and then I'll just quickly skip to the other thing. But I want to explain how does it work to be a designer and philosopher in this. So back, it's also I think 2012, I decided to scan my brain. It happened in London at UCL, I think. And I was working with a neuroscientist on this project because we were both interested, what would people do with this data and what to do with fMRI data of your brain as a citizen science? Can you join some of the studies, like compare your results to the papers and so on? And I was also making fun of these ideas of brain uploading, so I did my own little brain uploading over Dropbox and Facebook, where I put these pictures, I put the data, and I said to my friends, okay guys, there are all these brain pictures, what should we do with them? Some of my friends used them for VJing, like there were other funny stuff that happened around this, but we also organized some workshop on how people will use this data, SNPs, DNA data, fMRI data, what type of services we can have around it. And it was also a project that serves that open science advocacy. So we were looking into scenarios, how there will be maybe markets for such type of biodata. So what came out of it, it was like a design fiction, a short movie. And we were also brainstorming about all these issues. And in some sense, this project is also continuing because with a friend from Hackerspace in Singapore, he's really creating like a cloud service for open data, especially fMRI data and so on, that will support citizen science projects. And I'll not mention this, but here I was more interested in 16th century science, tinkering, and spheres. So it was this obsession again with spherification, with microfluidics, and more like return to alchemy and so on. So, as I mentioned, like my main topic today to discuss would be these DIY bio-prototypes. What happens when we let the DIY bio interact with the traditional artistic institutions? Because there are often tensions, and one of these tensions made a collector out of me. So I do have my prototype collection. Right now, it's, I think, only 3 pieces. One is this optical density turbidity sensor, which I have with me. Maybe I'll show it in a minute. Then it's, I do have also this hacked webcam turned into a microscope, but not with me. This is like some examples of such tools which I collect. But this is the first one I decided to take because it, in a Hectarea network, usually the way we work are workshops. We go to places, interact with local communities, try to be as inclusive, and then the outcome is usually the workshop and some small prototypes that happen in this workshop. One of them was this DIY mobile genetic lab, which is an open PCR tool in a suitcase. There is like a music box. Actually, here is a list of tools you have in that suitcase. So it's something you can carry around and sequence any organisms basically on the planet and pretend to be a spy or something with this suitcase. And this prototype, which was created under Hectarea as part of a workshop in Ljubljana, caught the attention of some art curators from Ars Electronica and some other big festivals, and they became interested in it as an object presenting the DIY bio movement. And they asked the person that created it to, to exhibit it. And that became a problem because Hecteria's style of work is we do workshops. We just don't show something, like we don't show works like artworks. And it created this strange tension, which we resolved in one way. I basically sacrificed. I proposed to my friends, I said, look, so why should we deal with this issue, money and who they will pay that person for the artwork. Let's create something like our own archive. And I said there is actually a value in preserving these original prototypes because maybe in 10 years, really, everyone will have a sequencing machine or something. So why not preserve these original prototypes and build something like our own collection where we will serve the evil thing, like, giving to the museums what they want, artifacts which represent something, and do these boring exhibitions, in my opinion. But we will use the money for something else, like either for preserving more prototypes of these early experiments, how to build your own equipment, or use the money in some other way. So this is the story of the collection, which I still find paradoxical and strange. I still find my position in this strange, but these are the prototypes. This is another one. It's optical density and turbidity sensor, which basically can be used to follow, E. coli in water or some other things which you want to see what is in the water. It's a very simple tool with a USB stick on which you have like a little microchip, basically, there is a diode that transmits light, and then you can have a simple program that can interpret this data. So the interesting thing about this tool, I would say, is why it became part of the collection, because I think it in an interesting way summarizes what happens around Hectarea network and many of these DIY bio networks. And it is this remixing culture behind it. So it was, the original PCB was created in 2012 by a famous Swiss hacker from Anima. It was this Gnusbuino board, which is very cheap. It's something like, $2 if I'm not, or $5, something like ridiculously cheap, which can serve various simple interactions you need to design. And then in the 2012-13, Kera start using it in various workshops in Indonesia and around Europe for workshops on how to build like such laboratory equipment. And then I don't have the last stage, and basically in Indonesia they created a clone of this, they created the tropical Gnus Bueno, which is even cheaper and serves even particular needs of that community. So for me it was interesting to see how this little board travels, how it is changed, repurposed in these different organizations, and how it really does enable us to build such tools. This is, I'm not very good in it, but I was trying to make fun, you know, me as a collector, this is the tool I'm trying to actually get now. So don't try to pay the artist more so you get the tool. But this is by Rudiger Trojok, I think is his last name, and he made this amazing gene gun, which is a technology which is like a tool which is trying to do genetic engineering basically on a mechanical level rather than chemical level, and it enables you to shoot pieces of DNA into plants and somehow modify them in ways maybe which is not completely regulated, but if you do it with many plants, maybe you will find one that is like a useful genetically modified plant. He did it more as a conceptual, like it is functional, but for him the original idea was more to provoke with this tool, because in some sense the regulations around such experiments in the European context are very strict. They don't enable you to tinker with genes in your garage, which you can in the States and other places. In Europe, you have to have special type of labs where that happens. But this tool somehow enables you to do these type of genetic modifications in your garage. It's not very clear whether it does or it doesn't, but it opens this discussion, basically. So the gene gun is something also that became an artwork, and it's presented in various gallery contexts, even if the hacker didn't want it. He didn't consider art so important, or so again, like we have this strange interaction between the DIY bio movement and the gallery official art world, where the art world sees something as a valuable piece of artwork, of something that represents this art-science interaction, even if it wasn't the original idea and motivation behind the work, and it opens this problematic there is this problematic moment. How does it affect the DIY bio community? Seriously, I believe it affects it in a negative way often. So we are trying, by creating the collection, we are trying to neutralize this negative effect of the art world on the DIY bio. I'm exaggerating a bit, but I do see this problem quite often with other hacker spaces. When the thing is done, when it becomes a product, and it cannot stay in the hacker space. I really believe that's the moment it needs to leave the space, because the hacker space, the DIY bio, should be more process-oriented, more about tinkering, trying, not really creating products. So my question would be, what would be the cycle? So this is something I wanted to show about the baby Gnus Bueno. I'm trying to get some of them into the collection. This is the story of that interesting board that enable a lot of this open source hardware equipment. I'll just skip this quickly. I guess I'm here now. I'm really curious about the life cycle and function of this laboratory equipment that is built on this open hardware platform. And I see how it evolves from workshops to prototypes to PCBs. First it's like Arduino, then people print their own boards. They want to make it cheaper. Interesting part is how it travels through education to art to design uses. And now it becomes also an interest in this, okay, can we build the research infrastructure around it? Can we build these community labs or infrastructure for doing research in developing countries? I'll just use quickly one example. It is, again, Bacteria.org, because I'm more familiar with that. Maybe there are more. And it is the microscope example. So right now it's connected to this organization, but it was also to another organizations in Indonesia, House of Natural Fiber. Now I will use LifePatch as an organization where it happens. This is their lab. This is one of I would say, collaborators, friend, Akbar, who is he's like a researcher, scientist in Indonesia, but he also has the citizen science projects with his friends in Bugisan, and they hang out with the local community. Kids come to their lab, to their citizen lab, and that is where the story happens. So back in 2009, actually it started with Mark Dusaye visiting Indonesia, and people complained that they don't have microscopes there, or he saw that they don't have anything in these laboratories. So he decided to show them a simple trick, and that was hacking webcam into a microscope, which there are people everywhere doing it. And somehow they improved this technique. So right now, it's at the stage, because there is this crucial component you need when you hack the webcam, and it is the stage. And to design the stage in the right way to create the microscope is actually not trivial. So one of the members developed like an open source project, which you can print or laser cut, or in Indonesia, they made a clone, and that's the interesting part for me. They worked with local artisans from Otatic Creative Workshop that works with glass. It repurposes glass, upcycles, or what is it called? It creates these lamps and other interesting stuff. And they also work with electronics. They often interact with the citizen science organizations. These are some projects where they do. So yes, Otatic decided to create this laser-cutted stage, but to use traditional artisan techniques they had and materials they would find. So they created this plastic special, it was like handmade basically, which is also for me interesting. While it's laser cutted in one place, here it's made with these traditional techniques. And then it often serves for workshops with children, so it's more like these educational activities. It has a huge impact in terms of doing this science education in Indonesia. And for children, whoever, I don't know, do you remember when you experienced the microscope the first time? I do believe for most people, this is the moment when they develop interest in science. And this is what is going on with these educational workshops with kids in Indonesia. Then it's also used for VJing. So that's very popular use. And then there is a serious use. So in the lab, in the Gadjah Mada University, they're really improving these webcams and trying to build like real laboratory equipment which is used for research in a country where there was no laboratory equipment, it was very expensive and only certain people could get an access. So it is democratizing in certain sense research and science. This is what in the university, this webcam hacking led to basically doing their own research into these special organisms that enable plants to get so they have an issue with volcanoes which destroy the fertile land, and you need to put something in the land in order to enable plants to grow. So that research was all done through these hacked, almost DIY bio ways. And these are just few examples how they developed the confidence through these early projects of webcam microscope hacking. They developed the confidence to build their own tools, their own electronics, to do their own workshops. This is a very popular project which connects art, science, design, where they use some moisture sensors and they create these like elaborate installations in various places in the world. Right now, this is traveling in Malaysia, and this is my last slide. What do I think? What do I see about the DIY bio as being special and different in these art and science collaborations, or why maybe I'm particularly more involved now in the DIY bios and in the art and science, which I used to be more interested before. I think they're more radical in terms of how they democratize science and technology, that they're pushing it away from just communicating, just showing, just giving a bit of that experience into really enabling hacking, DIY, appropriating, not only domesticating the technology, but really like becoming part of it. So while the typical ideal of involvement of society and science is about communication, about engagement, here I see some potential for even defining policy in a new way. Like, okay, we are not certain about certain, if we don't know something about certain technology, how it will affect society, let's test it in a small group. In that sense, I see these techniques almost like experimental policy, which sounds terrible, or people that do policy would probably kill me at this moment, but I'm happy that probably there are not that many people interested in that topic. So I'm interested in public participation in research and development, in this, in the global south, in like different communities as a way of experimenting with science and with policy or governance, and basically building communities around prototypes. That is why I look into Indonesia, where I see that happening. That is why I look into these, in these communities. And I hope I wasn't too long, but this is all. Thank you.